Hi all, we're going to talk about the dictator with whom you're probably the most familiar. This is Adolf Hitler, and he was the leader of the Nazi Party in Germany. As a brief biography, Hitler was born in Austria in 1889 and really didn't have a successful academic career. He dropped out of high school, he failed as an artist, and really knocked about until the outbreak of World War I. That's when he volunteered for the German army. While serving for the Germans, he was twice decorated for bravery with the Iron Cross. And after World War I ended, he settled in Germany permanently. And that's when he started attending the meetings of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or more commonly known as the Nazis. The Nazi Party was committed to two big ideas at this time. One was they wanted to throw out the Treaty of Versailles, especially the provisions that were not favorable to Germany, and they were also looking to combat communism. After the successful communist revolution in Russia, many countries in Europe were afraid that communism would spread. They were supported mostly by the lower middle and middle class people, though really through the 19-teens and early 1920s, the Nazi Party didn't have a lot of followers. It did become the Fascist Party of Germany, which we talked about in class. And they famously took on the swastika as a symbol, which remains a controversial and offensive image to people today. They set up a private militia known as the Brown Shirts or the Stormtroopers, and we'll see groups like this being used by Hitler through World War II. Hitler's rise to power really starts when he becomes the leader or the Führer of the Nazi Party, and part of this was because he was very good at speaking in crowds and he was good at organizing political support. The Nazis' first attempt to grab power was in Munich in 1923, and it failed, and as a consequence, Hitler was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in prison, even though he only served 9 months. And he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for treason because he acted against the government in Munich. It was here that he wrote his famous book, Mein Kampf, or My Struggle, that outlined a lot of his beliefs and goals that ended up being so disastrous for Europe. The first thing that comes to mind for many people when they think of Hitler is his fake ethnic group called the Aryans, who he said were blonde, blue-eyed Germans, and he said that they were superior, like some sort of master race. He also said that other groups, non-Aryans, especially Jews, Gypsies, Slavs, some of the other ethnic groups we've talked about, were inferior, and he even called them subhuman. He also believed the Treaty of Versailles was an outrage, and he thought that Germany should fight to get back the land that was taken from it in the Treaty of Versailles. Going along with this, he also believed that Germany was overcrowded and that it needed more space, more living space. And his plan was to conquer Eastern Europe and Russia to get that territory. Continuing his rise to power, he did leave prison in 1924 and went back to the Nazi Party. And really, through the 1920s, the mid to late 1920s, things don't really get going for the Nazi Party until the Depression starts. And this really halted any post-war recovery that Germany was having, and America stopped loaning money. So money dried up, and a lot of people were put out of work. By 1932, that meant nearly 30% of Germany's workforce was unemployed. A country usually likes to keep around about 5% unemployment. So 30% is significant. Germans started to look for a strong leader to counteract this crisis. the government that was currently in power in Germany thought that they could control Hitler, so they appointed him chancellor, similar to a prime minister. Same office that we talked about Otto von Bismarck held. So technically, Hitler did come to power in Germany legally, but he was not directly elected to office. Once he became the chancellor, though, he called for elections, and his goal was to get more Nazis into the German parliament. In these elections, the Nazis did win a narrow majority, especially after stirring up fear of the German Communist Party. And what had happened is a fire had broken out in the parliament building right before the elections, and the Nazi Party blamed the communists for that fire. There's already a lot of distrust and fear of the communists, so people believed a lot of the rumors, and consequently the Nazis get a narrow majority in the parliament. But they use this majority to really bring totalitarian rule to the country. The Nazis banned all other political parties, and many opponents were arrested. The SS, or Protection Squad, was created, and this group was really loyal only to Hitler and did a lot of his political dirty work. They arrested and murdered hundreds of his enemies just in 1934 alone. The Gestapo, you guys are probably familiar with that. Maybe you've seen it in movies or read about it in books. These were the Nazi secret police who terrorized individuals. If you got a knock on your door late at night, it was generally the Gestapo, and it generally was not a good thing. The Nazis did take control of the economy, and they outlawed any workers' unions or worker protests, but their policies did get millions back to work to try to pump up the economy again. Hitler also started broadcasting his propaganda, controlling newspapers, the radio, literature, painting, film, and everything was really geared at praising Hitler's leadership. Young people, if you were in school, you had to join the Hitler Youth if you were a boy, or the League of German Girls. And Hitler used these young people even to report on their parents and older generations who might be saying things unfavorable to Hitler and the Nazi rule. And of course, we're all familiar with the tragic religious persecution that Hitler perpetrated against the Jews. So his anti-Semitism was a main feature of his beliefs, and the laws depriving Jews of rights started as early as 1933, with violence starting just a few years later in Germany. Thanks for listening, and I hope this is helpful.